If it is true that there was a knowing effort to target specific organizations, as reported conservative organizations, that would be outrageous in the President's view, and there should be consequences.
That was White House Press Secretary Jay Carney last hour on increasing calls now for more answers over the growing IRS scandal. The tax agency admits targeting certain conservatives and other groups filing for tax-exempt status. It's not just conservative group, folks. If your mission statement is you want to make America a better place, you may have been targeted by the IRS in seeking your tax-exempt status. It's not conservative. It's just a principle. These are folks that want a tax-exempt status, like they call it 501c3 designation. Nonprofit, public charities, or private foundations that have open membership. They're not allowed to engage in political activity as their main sort of thing. They're not allowed to endorse or oppose political candidates or to donate money or time directly to these political campaigns. But they can lobby and support issue-based legislation as long as they let the IRS know. And both sides of the aisle do a ton of that. Okay, so there's nothing wrong with that, with doing that. What is wrong is if the IRS was specifically targeting these groups for a whole lot of extra scrutiny just because it had an objection to what they stood for. Jay Sekulow is chief counsel for the American Center for Law and Justice, and Jay's client is Kevin Kookogey. He's the leader of a conservative group who says his group is among those targeted by the IRS when he tried to get status as an educational organization. I tip my hat to you, Jay, because you and Mark Levin have really been the motivating forces behind this whole thing, complaining on behalf of your clients, like Kevin, to the IRS for a long time now, before we ever had any admission, before we had any Inspector General report saying it's so, they've been doing what you said. You smelled a rat. You knew that they were up to no good. Let me start with you on it, Jay, and tell us why and how.
Well, first of all, Mark Levin's organization and Landmark Legal did a great job in getting this Inspector General report started. We've handled the individual cases. He got the Inspector General report started, so he's done a great job, and I appreciate what Mark's done and our team. But let me tell you what I'm holding in my hand. I want to put an end to a myth right now. This is a letter from the Internal Revenue Service, Megan. This letter is from the Washington, D.C. office of the Internal Revenue Service. It's involving one of our clients in Albuquerque, New Mexico. It is signed by not just an agent, but a tax law specialist who is a lawyer with the Internal Revenue Service. So this whole notion that this is some limited, low-level staff, that is over with. This is out of Washington, D.C. So this whole narrative that the administration's putting forward, that Jay Carney keeps talking about, if the targeting happened, really, it's not an if. They've apologized for it, which, by the way, the apology is not accepted. They've apologized for targeting, so the president needs to stop the if and get to the reality here that this was a complete misuse of the Office of the Internal Revenue Service, an office that I started my career with as a tax lawyer, as a trial lawyer, a long time ago. And this is outrageous, and what our clients have been put through, years of waiting, is inappropriate, frankly unconstitutional.
Reportedly, this Inspector General's report, which we are hoping to get any day now, will say that senior IRS officials knew. They knew this was happening as early as 2011. So the initial spin from the IRS was it was low-level Cincinnati employees, and nobody knew, nobody senior levels. And now we found out it's not just Cincy, it's multiple cities, and the Inspector General's report is expected to conclude senior IRS officials knew. And indeed, the reports are now that as around May of 2012, the then commissioner of the IRS found out, and that the guy who's now the acting commissioner found out back in May of 2012. So they did know for a long time, for a year. Kevin, how did you first experience this? Because when the IRS messes with you, we all have like an inclination, like, are they messing with me? But then it gets to another level where you think, they're actually messing with me.
Yes, thank you, Megan. The first indication I had was when I received my first letter from the IRS, which was in May of 2011. And although that was a little more vague than the later letters that we got, it was actually by December of 2011, and this dovetails of what Jay was just saying, and this is important. I finally got a hold of an agent on December 30th, 2011. The agent was out of the Cincinnati office. And I said, "What is taking so long with my application?" And his words to me were, and I quote, he said, "We have been waiting on guidance from our superiors as to your organizations and other similar organizations." And I said, and he implied, by the way, that that authority was coming from beyond Cincinnati. So clearly we have a case. In fact, when that apology came out on Friday, I knew from my files this wasn't true.
How did it hurt you, if at all?
How did it hurt me? Gosh, let me count the ways. First of all, I was launching my organization, so I got a first-time grant of $30,000 promised to me upon condition that I get status. That kind of grant, although maybe not great in volume in and of itself, is a tool that you can use to raise money with other organizations. That grant was then later pulled, not because of anything that I had done, but because the granting organization decided that they couldn't wait any longer. In addition to that, I invested between $30,000 and $50,000 of my own money, all of which is for naught at this point.
I want to ask you, Jay, because now we've had even the Attorney General suggest that this may be criminal behavior. I mean, it's obviously outrageous, and every American should be concerned. But now they're talking about criminal. I mean, and I want to pick it up with you there after this break about whether somebody should be behind bars for this behavior if it is proven in a court of law. That's next. Jay, apparently groups who were spotted by the IRS for additional scrutiny were asked as many as 30 questions that a regular group, another group, would not have been asked, including, in some instances, reports of, tell us any members of your family who plan to be a candidate for public office. Detail your organization's involvement with the Tea Party. None of your business what my involvement is with the Tea Party, these organizations said. Indicate your position regarding every single issue important to your organization. Tell us about the derivation of your organization's name, especially if you had liberty in there or something that the IRS found potentially problematic. Is this has a crime been committed here?
Well, you know, the Attorney General today certainly raised the specter of talking about criminality. He said at minimum it's outrageous and civil liability. He's the one who raised the issue of criminality, which makes me wonder, what do they know that we don't know right now? I mean, is there more to it than we know? What I do know is this, that this was a coordinated attack on these organizations, including, by the way, Jewish organizations that were pro-Israel in their support. You mentioned earlier it wasn't just Tea Party-type organizations. And the Attorney General has raised the specter that there could be criminality here, and that, I guess, will depend on what internally was going on at the time that these reviews were taking place. But again, I want to say something, Megan, and I think is critical here. The White House has put out a narrative, and so has the IRS, that this was some rogue agent in Cincinnati, Ohio. And as I showed earlier, I've got a letter from a tax lawyer with Treasury to my client in Albuquerque, New Mexico. And the letter was from out of the IRS. And it did indicate, as Kevin said, that higher-ups were reviewing all of this. But she herself, the person that wrote the letter, is a lawyer. What
were they saying to you all along, Jay? I mean, now they've admitted it, although they deny that it was for political reasons. But what were they saying to you all along when you were accusing them of this?
They've been obnoxious to deal with, and I'm saying that as someone that worked and started my career with the agency. They were ridiculous. They came back with more questions. You mentioned 30, by the way. Megan, that doesn't include the 8 or 9 subparts to each of those questions. How about this one? Give us copies of every Facebook post you have on your organization's Facebook page and your personal Facebook page. How about we want a list of your members? We want a list of your donors, biographies and family information of members of your board of directors. So they've been, to be quite frank here, we've had 27 cases pending. 2 of our clients withdrew just because the time just got to them. They just said they can't deal with it anymore. 10 are still pending. 15 we received. But there are 10 of these still pending. We sent a demand letter out yesterday to the Commissioner of Internal Revenue Service, the Acting Commissioner Miller, as well as to the Chief Counsel, my old office, and said issue those exemptions by Friday, or we're taking legal action next week.
And that's the question about whether that was their mission all along, is to deter you from pursuing your mission.
Absolutely.
Kevin, do you think that's what was really going on here?
Well, yes. Megan, if I could add one critical point about my letter, because keep in mind that my organization mission statement is to challenge the imagination of the rising generation. We mentor high school and college students in conservative political philosophy, yet the IRS asked us to identify those who we were teaching and to detail all of the information we were teaching them, a clear violation of my First Amendment rights.
I just want to leave you with this parting thought. The chairman of the NAACP was on another network this morning and asked about this targeting of the Tea Party in particular, but it goes well beyond the Tea Party. But Julian Bond said on that network, it's entirely legitimate to look at the Tea Party. That's a group of people who are admittedly racist, who are overtly political, who have tried as best they can to harm President Obama in every way. They're the Taliban wing of American politics. And this is a group that does get tax-exempt status, Jay. His group's got it.
And the NAACP was the basis upon which the Supreme Court ruled in cases I relied on in the 1950s, saying you don't get membership lists. They tried the same thing against the NAACP. Didn't work out very well for them. I'm really surprised, and it's unfortunate that Julian Bond said that. He was a civil rights leader that has got a very is completely misunderstanding the nature of the groups that are involved with this. And to make those statements about getting membership lists and this kind of investigation is truly troubling, coming from someone that understands the struggle the NAACP engaged in.
Yeah, I mean, he said something about the IRS behaved in a heavy-handed manner, but he's got no love lost for the Tea Party, who he believes is racist. He believes they are overtly political, and the Taliban of American politics. I'll leave it at that. Guys, thank you.
Thank you, Megan.